Why me? Why now? Why is this happening? Never stop carrying the weight you've gathered over time, now transformed into a deep silence that seems to come from somewhere higher, almost intangible. Nothing seems to make sense. You did what you could, gave your best, believed with all your strength, waited patiently, tried in every possible way. And yet, life feels like a still life, an unmoving painting that continues to unfold in your hands, as if you're holding something you can't control. It's almost as if the universe is conspiring against you, pushing you beyond your limits, stripping away layer after layer of your existence. Everything you once knew is gone, leaving only fragile fragments that stubbornly remain. There comes a point where pain stops sending violent shocks and instead begins to slowly drain your faith, making it fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. The idea of a greater plan, of a divine purpose, starts to feel like cruelty, like an illusion fabricated to deceive. And yet here you are, listening to these words, still searching for answers, still trying to make sense of it all. Maybe it's not exactly hope that moves you, but an urgent, almost instinctive need. Maybe you've been broken so deeply that you can no longer pretend everything is okay. And in that rawness, in that exposed vulnerability, there is something real, something true. There is something the universe sees and values, something the world around you completely ignores. The pain you faced, the burden you were handed, it's not random, not a punishment without meaning, nor a chaos without direction. What seems like an endless sequence of disappointments, losses, and frustrations may in fact be the solid foundation upon which a profound transformation is being built. The hidden hand behind the breaking. Pain often arrives in disguise, like a thief entering your home without warning, bringing with it confusion and an unrelenting weight. There are no prior signs, no apparent logic, only the sharp blade of loss and the aching void of uncertainty that takes over everything. What once was clear in your life, your plans, your dreams, your certainties, now becomes blurred, as if a dense fog has covered it all. What once brought you comfort, relationships, routines, accomplishments, now feels distant, almost unreachable, or even completely torn away. But in the middle of this seemingly endless chaos, there is a hidden precision, something the human eye can't immediately see. Though the pain feels senseless, it is rarely without purpose. The universe does not operate on waste or coincidence. Every wound you carry, every delay that frustrated you, every disappointment that made you question everything, it all holds deep meaning, even if that meaning takes time to reveal itself, like a seed that must wait to germinate. Society around you teaches the opposite, though. Modern life idolizes ease, celebrates shortcuts that promise quick success, and glorifies instant gratification, as if suffering is something to be avoided at all costs. But the deeper laws of existence don't follow this shallow logic. They operate through cultivation, slow, intentional growth. In the cosmic economy of pain, it is not a cruel punishment imposed by an indifferent fate, but a transformative process. It's like fire that purifies by removing impurities, or a blade that cuts away what no longer serves. Those who are called to carry heavier truths, to live with a higher purpose, must first be emptied of all that is superficial, illusions, vain attachments, unrealistic expectations. Before a soul can become a sanctuary of peace and wisdom, it must be stripped down to its essence. The hidden hand behind your breaking does not act randomly or carelessly. It is skilled, guided by a greater intention. There's a reason why transformation rarely happens under the bright lights of day. The strongest seeds grow in the darkness of the soil, protected and nourished in secret. Caterpillars dissolve entirely inside their cocoons, in complete silence before the colorful wings of a butterfly can emerge. The process of becoming, of evolving into something greater, often looks like falling apart, like getting lost before finding oneself. You may look at your life now and see only ruins, a scene of destruction and loss. But beneath this surface of rubble, something ancient, sacred, and powerful is taking shape. The breaking is not meant to destroy you or reduce you to nothing. Its purpose is to realign you, to reposition you for something greater. The old structures of your identity, shallow beliefs, unmet expectations, illusions that used to hold you, must collapse so something stronger, more authentic, can rise in their place.
You have not been discarded by the universe, as it might seem in moments of despair. In truth, you are being planted, buried in a season of life you did not choose, in a soil you do not yet fully understand. And it is precisely in this place, in this moment of apparent darkness, that your roots are beginning to deepen. It's not something visible to the eyes, not celebrated by the world with applause or immediate recognition, but it is happening nonetheless. Every heartbreak, every disillusionment becomes like organic compost that nourishes wisdom. Each season of silence teaches you to listen more deeply, to notice whispers that once went unheard. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, your soul begins to reconfigure. No longer anchored in what you had, possessions, status, relationships, but in what you are becoming. A more resilient version of yourself, more self-aware. Pain itself becomes the architect of this depth. In the stillness of suffering, the incessant noise of the ego begins to fade, making way for a new kind of clarity. You start to hear echoes of something older than your day-to-day circumstances, something eternal that transcends time. The universe doesn't shape your destiny in haste, like a task to be completed quickly. It's not interested in shallow successes or fleeting victories that impress for a moment and then fade away. What the universe seeks is lasting meaning, significance that withstands the test of time. That's why it works slowly, often painfully, sculpting your character where once there was only unchecked ambition. The emptier you feel, the more space there is to be filled with what truly matters, with what lasts beyond appearances. What seems like a loss may, in truth, be a form of divine protection. What you interpret as failure may actually be laying the foundation for something much greater. Breaking in the hands of the universe is never the end of your story. It's the beginning of a profound revelation. And not the kind of revelation found in self-help books or motivational speeches, but a truth you feel in your bones, one that resonates in your very essence. When your world is shaken, when everything you once knew collapses, what remains is what is real, what is authentic. And it's in those moments of total vulnerability, when the facade you built crumbles and your hands are left empty, that something extraordinary begins to take shape. Mental clarity, emotional depth, a renewed sense of purpose. The breaking does not bury you, it gives you birth, brings you into a new existence. And even if you can't see it now, the invisible hand that allowed the pain is also the one preparing your rising, your rebirth. From the hidden hand that breaks with clear intention flows a refining fire that speaks a unique language, one that can only be understood by those who have gone through the same process. Once everything familiar has been stripped away from you, once the false self, the masks you wore, the personas you crafted begin to dissolve, a different voice emerges in your life. This voice is not loud or overwhelming. It doesn't come dressed in easy comfort or the warm reassurance of hollow promises. It reveals itself in silence, in raw intensity, in the transformation that occurs deep within your soul. The furnace of pain becomes your classroom, and pain itself becomes the language through which deeper wisdom is taught. Where once there were superficial prayers, said out of habit or obligation, now emerge groans from the core of your being. These groans are not desperate cries for immediate relief. They are sincere calls for revelation, for understanding. The fire does not ask for permission. It simply burns, consuming everything that cannot withstand its heat. And yet, within that burning lies a surprising clarity. What is inauthentic, what was built on fragile foundations, ego-rooted ambitions, plans crafted without alignment to your purpose, attachments that once defined your identity, cannot survive the flame. These elements dissolve in the intense heat, and what remains is what can never be taken from you. A faith that doesn't rely on visible results, an intimacy with the universe that doesn't demand immediate answers, a purpose that does not collapse under the pressure of hardship. In the forge of suffering, your character is not just tested, it is completely redefined, shaped into something new. You begin to discern what carries eternal weight, values, relationships, inner truths, and what was merely ornamental, superficial, destined to fade away.
Want to deepen this transformation? Explore the Money Script, a practical guide to realign your life. Link in the description or pinned in the comments. Vessels of scars and bearers of light. As you emerge from this transformative fire, something fundamental shifts, not just around you, but within you. You no longer carry the frantic urgency to be seen, validated, or understood by others. Instead, you carry something far more powerful, the living evidence of your resilience. Proof that you faced the worst, and more importantly, that you evolved from it. Where the world once measured your worth by perfection, flawless skin, a spotless life, you begin to see that the universe chooses its messengers by the scars they carry. Not the invisible wounds you hide carefully, but the visible, exposed marks that tell the story of your survival. These scars are proof that you went through suffering and still stand, not with bitterness in your heart, but with the kind of wisdom only experience can give. Scars speak a language that words often fail to express. They say, "I've been where you are." They whisper, "I know what it means to break and rise again." In a world saturated with performances and carefully rehearsed appearances, nothing is more magnetic than raw authenticity. Those who have suffered deeply and chosen the path of healing become natural beacons, not through force or effort, but through the presence they radiate. They don't need to explain why they shine. People feel it intuitively. There's a gravitational pull in their quietness, a silent credibility in the strength they show without boasting. The light they carry does not blind or intimidate. It guides, like a soft lantern in the darkness. It doesn't brag or seek attention. It attracts, it invites others in. And those still lost in the chaos of life are drawn not by rigid doctrines, but by the living reality of what they see embodied in you. Pain that has been transformed becomes a unique kind of power, but not a power that dominates or subdues. It is a subtle stabilizing force that calms and inspires. A person who has bled, who has been wounded and then mended, no longer fears imperfection. They embrace it as part of their journey. They speak not as a preacher judging from above, but as a walking testimony that healing is possible. Every step taken after the breaking becomes part of a silent sermon, a lesson that doesn't need applause to have value. This sermon only needs to be lived because the universe does not call the untouchables, those who've never fallen. It commissions the touched, the wounded, those who now walk more slowly, more mindfully, but carry something sacred in their silence. Healing does not erase what happened. It doesn't rewrite the past as if it never existed. Instead, it gives new meaning to those experiences. The betrayal that marked you, the loss that brought you down, the failure that made you doubt, none of it disappears. But these elements transform into offerings to the world, into tools you can use to help others. There is a fascinating paradox in all of this. The most broken vessels, the ones that seem the most fragile, become the most radiant. Light seeps through the cracks more easily than through untouched, flawless glass. And in those fractures, other people begin to see the reflection of their own journey, the potential for their own redemption. Pain personalizes your power. You don't offer abstract theories or generic advice. You offer a living testimony, a story that carries weight. You don't do this to elevate yourself above others, but to remind everyone that rising is possible, even after the deepest fall. The universe doesn't exalt those with perfect resumes or flawless-looking lives. It exalts those with surrendered hearts, those who have given themselves over to the process of transformation. A surrendered heart is one that survived its own collapse, that endured when all seemed lost. That survival grants a unique kind of authority, not the kind that shouts from a stage or demands attention, but the kind that whispers in someone's darkest hour, bringing comfort and hope. When you truly heal, your life is no longer just your own. It becomes a mirror where others can recognize themselves, a compass pointing north for the lost, a light that illuminates the way for those who haven't found the exit yet. It is not despite your scars, but precisely because of them that this happens. When your scars begin to shine, not as symbols of shame or failure, but as vessels of light, something subtle yet profoundly transformational begins to unfold. Surrender. This surrender is no longer driven by exhaustion, fear, or defeat, but by a clear revelation. You realize that clinging tightly does not protect you. In fact, it traps you in a cycle of suffering. Through pain, the illusion of control, the belief that you can manipulate every detail of life, dissolves like mist at sunrise.
You no longer carry the impulse to bend the universe to your will, forcing events to follow your plan. Instead, you begin to align with the natural flow of things, to dance with the rhythm of the cosmos. And in that alignment, surrender is no longer seen as a pathetic weakness. It becomes the threshold of true power. Letting go doesn't mean giving up or throwing in the towel. It means freeing yourself from the obsessive need to orchestrate every outcome, every step, and finally allowing the invisible wisdom, the one that guided your breaking, to also guide your becoming. True surrender is not passive. It is an act of extreme courage, a demonstration of faith that requires more strength than clinging with all your might. And once you surrender, a space opens. This space where arrogant pride once lived, where fear whispered lies, where the ego clung desperately, becomes a sacred chamber. It is in that emptiness that an invisible power begins to move. Not a power that demands or forces others to obey, but one that flows effortlessly, steadily, and with precision. You begin to understand that divine strength does not operate like worldly dominance, which thrives on performance and competition. The universe works through positioning, and that positioning is always humble, not in value, but in posture. Surrender says, I no longer strive to be who I think I must be. I am willing to become who I was always meant to be. In that state of surrender, the burdens you once carried begin to lift, as if someone is removing them from your shoulders. The constant noise in your mind quiets, and clarity sharpens like a blade. You stop chasing to be heard, to be right at all costs, or to desperately seek recognition. Instead, you simply become present, anchored in the moment. And in that presence, invisible doors begin to open, both within you and around you. The paradox reveals itself in all its glory. By losing the fight to maintain control, you gain access to something infinitely more powerful. Your past, with all its failures, pains, and scars, no longer needs to be erased or hidden. It becomes part of the architecture of your life, a structure that qualifies you, not disqualifies you. The things that once seemed to hold you back, the mistakes, the falls, now qualify you to carry depth, insight, and a grace that only suffering can teach. And you finally realize that surrender was never about losing your identity, but about discovering who you truly are. Beneath the layers of effort and unchecked ambition was someone shaped for something more lasting than fleeting applause, a purpose that withstands time. From ruin to rebirth. After the breaking, a new version of you begins to rise, silently, steadily, and almost unrecognizable to those who once knew you.
The pain that once seemed destined to destroy you completely becomes the fertile soil from which extraordinary strength begins to grow. Not everything from your old life is restored to its original form, nor should it be. Some pieces remain altered, cracked, or even missing, like parts of a puzzle that will never be the same again. But those brittle edges now catch the light differently, reflecting something unique and powerful. The fragments of your old life begin to reorganize, forming a new shape, not perfect, but stronger, more grounded, and more real than ever. What once seemed like total devastation, a fatal blow to your dreams, slowly reveals itself to be divine design, a greater plan you couldn't yet see. The universe doesn't restore things by going back in time, as if it could erase the past. It redeems by rewriting the meaning of every experience, turning scars into stories of triumph. Scars, once seen as shameful flaws, become the sacred script of your survival. Every mark on your skin, every painful memory, is evidence that something tried to break you and failed miserably. Your suffering becomes the ink with which compassion writes your message to the world. When someone meets you now, they don't just see an ordinary person. They encounter a presence refined by the fire of adversity, yet still carrying the gentleness to hold another's hand through the heat of their own battle.
There is a quiet strength that emerges from the ruins of your life, like a flower blooming amidst debris. You begin to understand life in layers, seeing beyond the surface. What once enraged you, an unfair criticism, an unexpected betrayal, now humbles you, teaches you humility. What once terrified you, the uncertainty of the future, the fear of failure, now grounds you, gives you deeper roots. Pain no longer owns you or defines you. It becomes a reference point, a lesson you carry, not a place you live in forever. The storms you survived recalibrate your values, redefining what truly matters. Joy becomes simpler, found in the little things, a stranger's smile, the sound of rain. Peace becomes more precious, a treasure you guard with care. And faith, real, enduring faith, is no longer just an idea to debate or discuss. It becomes a living force you carry in your chest. You stop clinging to absolute certainty, to the need to have all the answers. Instead, you walk in confidence, trusting the process. This transformation doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand announcements. It settles in slowly, almost silently, when you realize you no longer react from fear or impulse, but respond with wisdom born of pain. Where you once demanded instant answers, you now offer presence, a listening heart. Where you once questioned every suffering, you now extend understanding, genuine empathy. People begin to listen to you, not because you raise your voice, but because your very existence has something powerful to say. Redemption has reshaped your posture. You stand taller, not because you are unbroken, but because you've learned to walk with the pieces, transforming them into something beautiful. You are no longer a victim of your story, someone defeated by circumstances. You have become a vessel of the power within your journey. The ruins are still there, visible in your memory, but they've been rearranged into something useful, something sacred, something that inspires.
The universe didn't erase your story as if it never happened. It repurposed it, giving it a new meaning. And now, every step you take forward becomes a silent yet powerful declaration. The breaking did not end me. It equipped me. What was once just a narrative of survival begins to radiate beyond the borders of your own life, touching those around you. You become a beacon, not because you planned to be one, but because you walked through the fire and kept your light burning. People are drawn to you, not by your perfection, which never existed, but by your authentic presence. There is a gravity in your energy now, a silent authority that does not need to announce itself with shouts or spectacle. You speak not as someone who merely read about storms in books, but as someone who stood in the eye of the hurricane, cried through the violent winds, and emerged still breathing, still whole. The light that now lives in you was forged in darkness, and that origin gives you a depth that no artificial spotlight could ever replicate. There is a distinct weight in your voice, born from pain, carrying something those untouched, those who've never suffered, simply cannot offer. Empathy without pity, truth without arrogance. When others look at your life, they don't see someone who avoided the falls of existence. They see someone who learned to rise, to transform scars into strength. And because of that, your story becomes a mirror where others can glimpse the possibility of their own healing. Not everyone will understand what you carry, the invisible cost you paid. Not everyone will recognize the weight of what you faced, but those who are meant to cross your path will. And when that happens, your scars will speak the language of their silent wounds, creating a deep connection. To be a beacon does not mean having all the answers on the tip of your tongue. It means being willing to keep the flame alive, even when the winds of life try to blow it out. It means refusing to hide your process, your moments of doubt, just to appear perfect in the eyes of others. The cracks in your foundation, which once seemed like weaknesses, are now windows through which light escapes, illuminating the path for those around you. You don't need an elevated platform or a grand title. Your presence in itself is the message. Without conscious effort, you become an invitation for others to feel, to heal, and to believe again. The universe doesn't use your perfection, which never existed, to reach the world. It uses your redemption, your ability to turn pain into light. You become living proof that healing is possible, that growth is real, that pain does not have the final word in your story. Where others hide their past in shame, you carry yours like a torch, lighting the way, because you know that someone, somewhere, is still walking through the dark night. What almost destroyed you in the past now becomes a map, a guide for others to follow. And the beauty of it all is that you don't lead them to yourself like an authoritarian leader. You guide them to the same divine presence that carried you through the storm. You are not the final destination, the end point. You are the evidence that the path exists, that the crossing is worth it. In conclusion, when seen through the eyes of eternity, pain is no longer a meaningless mystery, a useless weight to carry. It becomes the very path through which you are refined, humbled in your initial arrogance, and ultimately commissioned for a greater mission. The universe doesn't place you before pain to break you into irreparable pieces, but to build you into something deeper, truer, and unshakable, like a rock polished by the sea. So if you are suffering now, doubting your worth, questioning your purpose in the dark shadows of life, remember this: the darkness you are walking through today may be exactly the place where your deepest roots are being planted, where your strength is being cultivated. And when you rise, because you will rise with time and determination, you will understand that the pain was not the end of your journey. It was the beginning of everything you were destined to become, a version of yourself that carries light where there once was only darkness.